Hey guys, tonight we begin in the soft flicker of a candlelit bedroom, heavy with the scent of soot and starch. The year is 1852, and the first sound you hear isn't birdsong or footsteps. It's the slow groan of timber beams above you, and the faint clatter of a maid stoking the downstairs fire. You blink awake beneath a lace-trimmed nightcap, and something feels immediately off. Your corset's not on yet, but it's waiting. Your name isn't John or Henry. You're not a man. You lie beneath a thick woolen blanket, the edges embroidered with fading ivy vines, in a bed too firm, in a room too cold. Your chamber pot sits beside you, no indoor plumbing of course, and a cracked pitcher of water sits on your washstand like a frozen dare. Victorian mornings come in two varieties, damp or damp with fog, and you've lucked into the latter. You shuffle upright in your narrow bed, stiff from sleep, and stretch your arms, carefully. The draft finds your wrists instantly. Your nightgown is cotton, itchy, and serviceable. No frills unless you're wealthy, but you're not. You're respectable. Respectable means you're neither a scullery maid nor someone with control over your destiny. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. It's always so soothing to see us all together across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wallpaper beside your bed peels ever so slightly at the seam, a faded print of ferns and flying insects. This was considered cheerful. You're not sure it worked. You swing your feet over the edge of the bed and instantly regret it. Cold floorboards. No slippers. You forgot them last night, and you will feel that mistake all morning. You tiptoe across the room, teeth already clacking lightly from the chill. Your hands tremble as you pour water into the basin. It's icy. You wash quickly, dabbing your cheeks, scrubbing behind your ears. If you're lucky, you'll warm up by lunchtime. From the hallway you hear a voice. Your mother's, or your sister's, or perhaps the housekeeper, already knocking about with iron pots and yesterday's gossip. You don't dare linger. Victorian women are not meant to luxuriate. You're not meant to claim time. Your day is not your own. Time, here, is something women live inside of, not something they command, and you haven't even gotten dressed yet. Your underthings come first. Petticoats, chemise, stockings with garters, layer after layer, each one a decision made not by you, but by society. Corset next. You can lace it yourself, but it's never quite right. If someone else tightens it, they'll pull until you gasp. A cinched waist is fashionable. A functional ribcage? Optional. Scholars still debate whether the long-term health consequences of corsetry were exaggerated by later feminists or downplayed by Victorian doctors. Either way, your lungs disagree with both. Next comes the dress. Plain wool in winter, cotton in summer, though both weigh more than you expect. Victorian fabric isn't light or breezy. It's substantial, as if the era itself demanded its clothing feel like moral burden. You fumble with buttons, hooks, and the delicate dance of hiding your ankles while still being able to move. Modesty is everything. Accidentally flashing your knee would be social death, unless you're a toddler or a ghost. Your hair is a project unto itself. If you're unmarried, it may be worn down in long brushed waves. If married, it must be pinned up and tamed. Hair speaks. Hair tattles. Hair is one of the only parts of you allowed to flirt in public, so naturally, it's regulated to exhaustion. Your fingers, chapped from winter and water, fumble with your brooch. The clasp sticks. You wince. You try again. Success. You examine yourself in the mirror. You look fine. Not radiant, not hideous. Simply fine. In this world, fine is what you hope for. It means no one will talk. Downstairs, your father or husband, or both depending on your station, reads a newspaper with serious eyebrows. There is toast. There is tea. There is the expectation that you say little, chew quietly and smile often. Women, in this house and beyond it, are praised for what they restrain, their laughter, their hunger, their ambition. You nod along to remarks about railroads and parliamentary reform. You don't understand all of it, and if you did, you wouldn't admit it. It isn't your place. There's a little clock ticking above the mantel. You count the ticks. This is how your day will pass. not in great events or grand movements, but in small, managed silences. Your job is to glide through them, polished and pleasant, as if you were never there. And as you finish your tepid tea, milk first, of course, you wonder, is this all? The jury's out on whether most Victorian women truly felt confined by these rituals, or simply accepted them as natural. Diaries from the era offer both quiet submission and bursts of rebellion. What's clear is that surviving a day like this, being expected to smile through it, requires a strength no one will write poems about. Not in this century at least. Tomorrow might be better. But first, you need to get through today. The corset still bites into your ribs as you make your way toward the wardrobe. It's not the kind of pain that makes you cry out. It's the dull, constant sort that makes you forget what it's like to breathe deeply. You've learned to move differently now. You don't twist too fast, bend too low, or laugh too freely. Laughter can snap a stay. Also, it's not terribly ladylike. Your dress today has buttons down the back, which means you need help. You ring the bell for the maid, assuming you're lucky enough to have one. She's young, younger than you, and already has the bent posture of someone who's scrubbed 1,000 steps and never sat down on any of them. Her hands shake a little as she fastens the final loop at your collar. Neither of you speaks much. Silence is its own form of currency in a house like this. The less said, the better. The fewer emotions shown, the safer everyone feels. By now, your stomach has remembered it's empty. Time for breakfast. Or, as it should more properly be described, light morning refreshment. You're not meant to indulge. A slice of toast, a curl of butter, one soft-boiled egg if it's a generous day. Tea, of course, always tea. The taste is warm but weak, like someone whispered the idea of flavour into the water from across the room. You eat in silence with others, you smile when spoken to, you nod when expected. And yet, this dull morning routine masks something sharper. Each moment is part of your performance. Victorian society requires women to be graceful ornaments, but only in motion. To sit still too long is to invite suspicion. To appear too lively is to risk accusation. Somewhere between those extremes, you exist. As you carefully cut your toast into dainty, socially acceptable triangles, you consider what awaits. A calling card rests on the parlour tray. Visitors. That means gloves, polite compliments, and the kind of conversation that dances in place like a governess doing the waltz on broken eggshells. The weather, of course. Children's health. Queen Victoria's latest Widow Weepy ensemble. Whatever you do, don't mention politics. In case you were wondering, no, they don't care what you think about anything beyond soup recipes and embroidery patterns. And even then, your enthusiasm should be restrained. Ladies who express too much joy in stitching are often suspected of poor breeding. It's worth noting, experts still debate whether Victorian etiquette manuals truly reflected the lived behaviour of most women, or merely created an ideal few could actually achieve. But here you are, adhering to it all. You can't afford not to. You're already one raised voice or firm opinion away from being called hysterical. The rest of the morning passes in domestic haze. A brief stroll in the garden, under supervision if you're unmarried, of course. A few letters to write. Needlepoint. Always more needlepoint. It is the universal symbol of female virtue, a stitched record of how obediently your hands could waste time. And then, company. You hear the rattle of the knocker and the murmurs in the hall. The parlour doors open, ladies enter, and you rise like a well-trained puppet. There's kissing of the air near cheeks, not quite touching, and remarks about the weather, which you pretend are riveting. Someone's cousin just got engaged. Another's daughter took ill from a chill in the spirit. You nod in concern. Then someone mentions a scandal. A woman ran off, with a painter. To the continent. France, probably. The other women gasp like they've witnessed a fire. You pretend to gasp too, but in truth your heart skips. Not from judgment, but envy. Imagine that. Imagine simply leaving. But you don't. You can't. Not now, not ever. You sit a little straighter. The corset pinches again. Tea is served, lukewarm, steeped too long, and you accept it with a smile. Because that's what women do. We sip. We smile. We say how dreadful and how charming in equal measure, and we do not under any circumstances say how we really feel. You glance down at the embroidered napkin in your lap. You trace the tiny rosebuds with your finger and remember that you stitched them months ago, during a fit of anxious energy after a neighbour's stillbirth. No one talked about it, of course, but you knew. Everyone did. Silence is part of the decor. Somewhere between the second cup of tea and your sixth fake laugh, you catch yourself drifting. This can't be all there is. Surely life was meant to be more than this, than corsets and curtsies and careful conversations. Whisper 1 in the comments below if this tale charms your heart, or 2 if it sends shivers down your spine. Later, alone in your room again, you exhale sharply. The corset finally comes off, and for a moment, you feel like a creature released from its shell. You press your fingers to your stomach, now marked by red lines and indentations. You look in the mirror. You don't look frail. You look tired. The wallpaper curls in the corner. Outside, the sky has turned grey again. You lean against the windowsill and look down at the street. A child runs past, barefoot, shrieking with joy, and disappears behind a cart. You wonder if she'll be wearing a corset in 10 years. You wake up the next day with pillow creases on your cheek and the dull ache of yesterday's corset still printed on your ribs. Your back hurts. Your jaw aches. You may have clenched through half the night. And there is no such thing as sleeping in. Victorian homes are temples of routine, and you, whether servant or gentlewoman, are never the priestess. At best, you're a particularly dutiful acolyte. Breakfast again, dry toast, stewed fruit, tea that tastes like disappointment. You nibble without much thought, because today the weight of your role feels heavier than usual. There's a schedule to keep, a rhythm that cannot be broken without someone somewhere noticing. You're not invisible here, not exactly, but you're only visible in the way wallpaper is, present, decorative, unremarked, unless torn. Your first task of the day? Assist with preparations for guests. If you're in a working-class home, this means hauling water, chopping vegetables, and trying to keep the coal fire alive without coughing your lungs up. If you're middle class, like you are, it's worse in a different way. You're expected to supervise, but not intervene. You must have opinions about table settings, but never complain about your sore feet. You should have aesthetic vision, but also make it seem like everything was effortlessly done by the housemaid. And so, you glide through your morning like a feather caught in a draft. You check the silverware. You nod at flower arrangements. You approve the placement of hand towels in the powder room. All the while, your stomach coils with a particular tension, because appearances are everything, and appearances are never quite right. One slip, a cracked teacup, a crooked doily, and someone will talk. Not to your face, of course. Behind fans, between bites of sponge cake, in letters sealed with practiced politeness. Reputation in Victorian England is like antique glass, pretty, fragile, and permanently cracked once dropped. Your gloves are too tight today, but they match your dress perfectly. You force your fingers into them one by one, wincing at the seams. Pain is part of presentation. You smooth the fabric down, take a deep breath, and prepare to greet the guests. They arrive in 2s and 3s, layered in shawls and veils, smelling faintly of lavender and mothballs. The parlour fills with murmurs and half-laughs. The air gets stuffier by the minute. A child screams somewhere upstairs, and everyone pretends not to hear it. A woman mentions her husband's promotion. Another laments the rising price of gloves. You nod sympathetically, wondering what it would feel like to talk about something real. But no one here does. You catch the gaze of another woman across the room, a woman you've seen before but never spoken to in earnest. Her smile is tight. Her eyes are tired, and in that brief glance there is a kind of silent understanding. This is the role, and we are playing it together. Scholars remain divided on how much emotional support women found in these heavily restricted social circles. Some say the drawing room was a secret refuge, a place where coded empathy passed in glances and gossip. Others argue it was a gilded cage, one where women monitored each other as much as they consoled. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. As the guests trickle out, the house settles into afternoon stillness. You remove your gloves, finally, and flex your fingers. Your knuckles are white. You head to the sitting room, not because you want to, but because that's what comes next. In Victorian life, spontaneity is not a virtue. Structure is God. Deviate too far, and people assume something's wrong with you, or worse, that you want attention. In the sitting room, your sister is already embroidering something, probably flowers again. She's better at it than you, and she knows it. You pretend not to mind. You pick up your own project and begin, each stitch pulling you deeper into a kind of dull hypnosis. The fabric tightens in your hoop, your back curves, your mind wanders. You think of your cousin Mary, well, technically your second cousin once removed, who moved to Canada last spring. She writes strange letters. She walks without a chaperone. She bakes her own bread and reads novels about pirates. You suspect she's scandalously happy. And just as that thought forms, your thread snaps. You sigh. Not dramatically, not audibly, just enough to feel it in your chest. You reach for new thread and start again, wondering, if you left, would anyone follow? It's a dangerous thought, almost a forbidden one. You glance at the clock. Still hours until dinner. The dinner bell rings with theatrical precision, and you move as expected. Not quickly. That would seem eager. Not slowly. That would seem sullen. Just the right graceful glide, hands folded gently in front of you like a woman in a painting. You've been practicing this walk since you were 12. Tonight's meal is boiled beef, soft carrots, and overcooked peas. It's not exactly indulgent, but you are reminded, gently, with every bland forkful, that hunger is not meant to be truly satisfied. Women should eat delicately, not hungrily. You slice your food into polite portions and chew with attention, as if chewing too fast might spark a scandal. The man at the head of the table talks. Of course he does. His voice fills the room, bouncing off the high plaster ceiling like it paid rent. He discusses politics, money, the railways, the Queen's latest speech. You nod along even when you disagree, especially when you disagree, because offering opinions is not your place. Your place is to smile vaguely and pass the salt when asked. You glance across the table at your mother. She sits straight as a rod, years of habit etched into her posture. Her expression is perfectly unreadable. Your sister stares at her plate. No one raises their voice. No one leans back in their chair. This is Victorian dinner decorum. Less nourishment, more theatre. Just after dessert, a wobbly, lukewarm custard that tastes faintly of defeat, the conversation turns to a neighbour's daughter. She's been sent away. Nerves, they say. Too many imaginings. Too many late-night walks in the garden. A few whispered suspicions about a young tutor. No one says the word madness, but it clings to the air like dust. You excuse yourself early, your stomach knotted. In the hallway, you exhale into the silence, and for a fleeting moment you let your real face return, the one that isn't composed and pleasant and careful, the one with tired eyes and a twitch at the jaw. You allow yourself one deep breath. 2. Then, just as quickly, it's gone. Back in your room, the fire has gone out. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and sit by the window, staring at the street lamp outside. It flickers weakly, gas-fed and barely functional. You imagine someone, somewhere, running through the street beneath it. A woman in boots, dress hitched up, breathless, running towards something, or away. Victorian society had little tolerance for female restlessness. Scholars still debate whether the rigid domestic roles were genuinely protective, as many claimed, or simply controlling. Either way, the effect was the same. Boredom was safer than boldness. Your fingers drift to your journal, tucked beneath your pillow. You open it, slowly, like someone lifting a trapdoor. The pages hold everything you can't say aloud. Thoughts about leaving, questions about love, little drawings of birds you've never seen in real life. It's your one unedited space, and even then you sometimes censor yourself. You dip your pen into ink and begin to write. Not much, just a few sentences, a little memory from childhood, a fragment of a dream, something about the way the kitchen smelled this morning, all burnt toast and damp wool. It isn't revolutionary, but it's yours, and maybe that's something. The clock ticks on. A log shifts in the hearth. Outside, a dog barks once and goes quiet. Tap 3 in the comments below if this story makes you smile, or 4 if it leaves you chilled. You let the ink dry, close the book and return it to its hiding place. You've never shown it to anyone. You're not sure you ever will. But the thought of someone reading it one day, decades from now maybe, makes you feel like you've carved a small hole in time, just enough to breathe through. A fringe detail? Some Victorian women wrote coded diaries. Others stitched secrets into the hems of their dresses. One, it's said, used lemon juice to write invisible letters to her sister in France. You aren't that brave, not yet. But still, you write. Because someone needs to remember. Morning returns like a stubborn stain. Faint light through soot-dusted curtains, the creak of old floorboards, and that familiar pressure around your waist. You've laced the corset a little looser today. A quiet rebellion, almost imperceptible, but you feel it, and that's what matters. It's one extra spoonful of breath, 1 inch more space to think. You descend the stairs in practiced silence. There's a rhythm to it now. Step, hover, smooth the hem, glance, proceed. You don't make noise in this house. Noise suggests chaos. Chaos implies weakness. And women, in this world, must be the calm centre of the storm, even when the storm is in their own chest. Today's focus is keeping house. Not just cleaning, but embodying the entire domestic ideal. You must become the spirit of comfort, the guardian of order, and yes, the furniture must be polished to a mirror shine, the mirrors too. Dust is a moral failing. You begin with the parlour. It smells faintly of coal smoke and lavender. There's a stain on the armchair, a ring from someone's teacup. You scrub it gently, with a rag and a sigh. No one saw who left it, but it's still your problem. Of course it is. Cleaning in this world is never just about hygiene. It's a ritual, a quiet performance of virtue, a declaration that you are useful, obedient, good. You dust the bookshelf next, careful not to disturb the arrangement. Heaven forbid the Dickens novels shift out of alphabetical order. You even dust the family Bible, though no one has opened it in months. Later you turn to the laundry. The basin is already filled. The water, as always, is cold. Your hands plunge into it like reluctant birds. You scrub linens until your knuckles sting, hanging them on the line with fingers turned red and raw. The wind snaps at your sleeves. Your nose runs. You do not complain. Fun fact? Victorian women spent an estimated 30% of their waking hours on laundry and garment care, a statistic most often recounted with a shrug, as if scrubbing underclothes with lye were simply a charming quirk of history. You pause and press a damp sheet to your cheek. It smells like lye and regret. You wonder what it would be like to pay someone else to do this. You wonder what it would be like to not do it at all. Inside, you polish candlesticks, arrange dried flowers, and fix the crooked needlepoint that's always threatening to slide off its hook. At no point does anyone say thank you. But they would notice if you didn't. Somewhere during the scrubbing of the baseboards, you get to thinking, why must women prove their worth with cleanliness? Men may measure success in pounds, in politics, in printed words, but for women, it's soap and silence. Experts still debate whether the cult of domesticity was empowering in any indirect way, whether it allowed women some measure of authority in the private sphere. But authority without freedom is just nicely scented captivity. After lunch, more stewed root vegetables, you're tasked with organising the linen closet. It's oddly satisfying. The neat rows, the labelled shelves, the crisp folds, but satisfaction is dangerous. You remind yourself not to enjoy this too much. Joy in domesticity is fine, but visible pride, that could make you suspect, arrogant, uppity, and that, my dear, is an excellent way to be married off sooner. Later you're sent to mend socks. You sit by the window with your darning egg stitching small holes into invisibility. The thread bites your fingers, your spine curls, your eyes blur. No one notices you're there, not really. You're just part of the furniture again. Until a knock at the door. A boy from the neighbouring farm delivering eggs. You open the door and for a moment the cool air hits your cheeks like freedom. He's muddy, breathless, and holding a half-broken basket. He smiles awkwardly. You smile back instinctively. Then shut the door, and just like that the spell is broken. You're back in the house, back in the role. You gather your needle and thread. You fold the socks. You stand. It's not the work that wears you down. It's the invisibility. You've been feeling it for days now, that dull ache in your lower back, that strange heaviness behind your eyes. You try to ignore it. Victorian women are expected to soldier on through discomfort. Pain is not spoken of unless it is poetic, unless it can be folded into a sonnet or stitched into a handkerchief. But your body has other plans. You wake in the middle of the night shivering, soaked in sweat. Your hands tremble as you fumble for the candle. The flame flickers reluctantly, revealing your pale face in the mirror. Something is wrong. Deeply, bodily wrong. By morning, there is blood. Not your usual monthly curse, something heavier. You feel weak, dizzy. Your mother glances at you with tight lips and says nothing. The housekeeper quietly moves a chair closer to the hearth. A quiet understanding settles. You are not well. And that is deeply inconvenient. You're told to rest. Rest means lying very still, under heavy covers, while life continues around you without permission. A cup of beef broth appears, a damp cloth for your forehead, but no doctor, not yet, not unless things get truly dire. Doctors are expensive, and you're just a girl with vague complaints. Eventually someone does call for the physician. He arrives, top hat, gloves and all. His presence is theatrical, his opinion predictable. You're suffering from a female imbalance, or congestion of the womb, perhaps hysteria. The terminology shifts, but the implication is always the same. Your body is the problem. Not a medical problem, mind you, a moral one. He prescribes rest, bland food, and perhaps a tonic containing opium. He does not ask what hurts. He does not listen long enough to learn. He suggests marriage might fix it, or spiritual reflection, or leeches. Yes, actual leeches. Quirky fact: the Victorians used leeches to treat everything from headaches to supposed uterine derangement. You wonder if anyone ever questioned the logic of draining a weak woman of more blood. Experts still debate whether the male-dominated medical profession of the era truly believed these treatments helped, or simply needed a way to control what they didn't understand. Either way, you feel no better, only fainter. You lie there, curled in a quilt, while your body wages quiet war against itself. Your skin itches. Your breath feels thin. You try not to cry, because that would confirm their theories. Women cry too much, they say. Women are fragile. You think about death, not because you want it, but because it was always lurking for women like you. Pregnancy could kill, childbirth could maim, a cold could turn to fever, and fever to funeral. And through it all, your suffering would be wrapped in lace and euphemism. In a few days, you begin to recover, sort of. The bleeding slows. The colour returns to your cheeks. The doctor nods gravely, as if his leeches deserve credit. You return to your duties, quietly, carefully, and no one ever asks what you went through. Because in this world, a woman's pain is not news. It is routine. You try to shake it off. You bathe, you comb your hair, you walk the garden path. But your body still remembers. There's a weakness in your knees, a flutter in your chest. You hold on to the banister just a second too long as you descend the stairs. No one notices, or if they do, they don't speak of it, and that somehow hurts more. You return to your embroidery, your laundry, your polite smiles. But you move a little slower now. You glance at your hands more often, checking for tremors. You listen to your heartbeat like a distant drum you no longer control. That night, you write in your journal again, just 3 words: I survived again. You blow out the candle and lie in the dark. The sun is out today, an event rare enough to be noted in the household ledger, next to the day's bread delivery and how many eggs the hens have bothered to lay. Sunlight creeps timidly through the lace curtains, casting patterns across the wooden floor like a faded wedding veil. You should feel better. You should feel grateful. You do not. Because today, like so many others, begins with the sounds of children. Your younger siblings, if you have them, or perhaps the neighbour's brood, shriek from the garden with a reckless freedom you can't remember ever having. One trips, one wails, one throws mud. You flinch. You're not allowed to scream anymore. Inside, it's time for the nursery. Time for mothering. Time for you to be the patient, watchful presence the household expects. Victorian motherhood is a strange paradox. Women are revered as guardians of virtue, angels of the home, and yet their children often die. Often. It's so common it's practically factored into family planning. 3 children born? Prepare for only 2, or 1, or none. Today, you help with the toddler. He is red-faced and furious about everything from the shape of his spoon to the concept of bedtime. He throws a rattle. You dodge it. You smile. You feed him gruel. Milky, lukewarm and dismal. He spits it back at you. You wipe your face with the same calm they expect you to embody. You sing a lullaby and he screams louder. You rock him until your arms ache, your back cramps, and your eyes begin to blur with exhaustion. Fun fact: Victorian nurseries often used opium-based syrups, like Godfrey's cordial or Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, to calm babies. They worked, because they were sedatives, for infants. You don't use them, not today. But the bottle is there, quietly waiting on the shelf, a glass vial of temporary peace. As the toddler finally sleeps, curled in his cradle like a flushed cherub, you sit in the rocking chair and stare into the middle distance. Your lap is sticky. Your sleeve smells faintly of milk. You wonder if you'll ever be a mother, not a surrogate, not a stand-in, but a real one, with your own baby, your own family, and then you remember what that would mean. Pregnancy, again, childbirth, the blood, the tearing, the prayers, the long nights, the judgment if the baby is weak, the silence if it dies, the funeral if there is money for one, the absence if there isn't. Scholars remain divided on whether Victorian women accepted infant mortality as natural or suffered silently under its weight. Some wrote poems, some carved names into stone, some simply never spoke again. You watch as the child's chest rises and falls with perfect rhythmic ease. You envy him, not his youth, but his freedom from expectation. He does not yet know that one day he'll be praised for simply existing while you must do 1,000 things, perfectly, just to be considered adequate. Later your older sister returns from her walk. She's flushed and whispery. She has something to tell you, something shocking. She leans in and whispers that Mrs. Ellison down the street had another stillbirth. That's her third. The words land between you like a dropped glass. You think of Mrs. Ellison's quiet smile, her swollen ankles, the way she always brought biscuits to the church social, and now this. No one will talk about it. Not out loud. There will be a meal sent to her house, maybe flowers, but no conversation, no comfort, just folded hands and lowered voices. The grief is always silent. You walk to the sewing room. You pick up a length of blue fabric meant for a child's christening gown. It will never be worn, but you sew anyway, because doing nothing would feel worse. The fabric slips through your fingers like time. The doctor is back. Not for you this time, for your aunt, who's been off lately. That's the word used. Office. Not ill, not in pain, just not quite herself. She stares at the same corner of the room for hours. She hums when no music is playing. She mutters names no one recognises. Your aunt, who once taught you how to hem a sleeve and win at cards with a crooked smile, now spends her days wrapped in shawls by the fire, blinking slowly like a stunned bird. And so the family calls the doctor. He examines her pulse, listens to her heartbeat, peers into her eyes and declares, "Hysteria." Of course, that old favourite. You sit quietly nearby as he explains his diagnosis to the room like a lecturer at a museum exhibit. The womb, he says gravely, is a wandering organ. It floats. It misbehaves. It causes fits, melancholy, indecision, restlessness. All the things men don't understand are blamed on the uterus. You want to laugh, but not because it's funny. You want to laugh because it's ridiculous and terrifying. He prescribes a tonic, rest, avoidance of intellectual stimulation, maybe a holiday, maybe seclusion. He suggests gently that if the condition persists, she may need to be removed to a place more suited to her care. You know what he means, an asylum. Fun fact. In Victorian England, women could be committed for almost anything. Refusing to marry, reading too much, writing, crying, laughing, being too quiet, being too loud. There were cases where husbands committed their wives for religious enthusiasm or imaginary female trouble. Experts still debate whether the rise in asylum admissions reflected actual mental health crises or simply the tightening grip of male authority over women's inner lives. Either way, the result was the same. If you were inconvenient, you could be vanished. That evening you visit your aunt's room. She's quiet, alert even. Her eyes meet yours with eerie clarity. "Don't let them take me," she says. "You promise." You don't know if you can keep it. The next day she seems fine again. She pours tea, she comments on the weather. She folds a napkin with perfect precision. Everyone breathes easier, but you watch her closely. You see the tremble in her fingers. You hear the catch in her breath when the piano music drifts in from the parlour, and you begin to understand just how narrow the tightrope really is. You retreat to your bedroom and stare at your reflection. Is your hair too loose? Your posture too slouched? Did you say something unusual at lunch? You run through a list of possible offences, and suddenly you're sweating under your collar. The world outside talks of progress, steamships, telegraphs, empire. But inside this house, inside this life, the rules haven't changed. Step out of line and you're labelled, diagnosed, repackaged as a problem, a defect, a warning to others. That night, you sleep with your journal under your pillow again. You write nothing. You simply hold it, like a shield. You dream of carriages without drivers, corridors with no doors, long halls where women whisper to each other in forgotten languages. In the dream, they are not sick. They are furious. The house is still asleep when you rise, early, even for you. A faint grey light seeps through the window pane, casting everything in that pre-dawn glow where shapes are half shadow and silence is king. You tiptoe down the hall past portraits of ancestors with tight lips and colder eyes. They all look like they'd disapprove of you, no matter what you're doing. You head to the kitchen, thinking maybe you'll steal a quiet cup of tea, just a moment, just for yourself. But you're not alone. The housemaid is already there, sleeves rolled, hair pinned, eyes hollow. She doesn't startle when she sees you, just nods, like someone who's too tired to flinch. She's kneading dough with aching precision, arms dusted in flour, wrists red from scrubbing. You murmur a hello, and she replies with a weary smile. You both stand there for a moment in the warmth of the stove, the only warmth this house seems to allow. And then you notice the bruise on her wrist. It's faint, just barely blooming beneath the skin. She notices you noticing and quickly tugs her sleeve down. Neither of you says a word, because what would you say? A woman like her, young, working class, unmarried, has few protections. If the master of the house touches her, there is no recourse. If she speaks out, she's dismissed. If she stays silent, she's damaged. It's a lose-lose-lose scenario. This is what Victorian morality doesn't put in the etiquette books. You sit down at the table, she pours you tea. It's bitter, but you drink it anyway. It feels like a contract. The two of you won't speak of what you saw, but you will remember. Later that day, you overhear your father complaining about the maid being moody. He says it like a flaw in her stitching. You look at him and feel nothing, or maybe too many things to name. Victorian marriage, you realise, is not a partnership. It's a contract, and most women never even saw the fine print. A woman becomes a wife, then a mother, then, eventually, a ghost. Her opinions, her wages, her body, all legally absorbed into her husband's name. Fun fact. Until the Married Women's Property Acts of 1870 and 1882, anything a woman owned or earned became her husband's by law. Even her children weren't legally hers. Scholars remain divided on how much women resisted these structures in private. Diaries suggest both resignation and rebellion. What's clear is that many simply endured and taught their daughters to do the same. You sit in the parlour later, watching your younger cousin flirt with her fiancé. She's giggling. He's smug. You watch her laugh too loudly and you want to warn her, but you don't, because even warnings are dangerous. Later in your room, you study the bruises on your maid's wrist again, in memory now. You wonder how many like hers go unseen, how many women bend quietly under hands that claim to love them. You wonder if love in this world is just another word for obligation or ownership. Your own reflection stares back at you from the mirror. The flicker of candlelight makes your face look older, or maybe just honest. You press your fingertips to the glass, imagining for one mad moment that it could be a door, that you could step through it and find a different life on the other side. Then someone calls your name, and you turn away. You're summoned to the sitting room. Not invited, summoned. A formal visit is expected and your presence is required. You smooth your dress, check your cuffs, and bite your tongue until you're certain your smile will hold. The guest today is a widow, Mrs. Fairley. You've met her once or twice at church, though never alone. She wears the full mourning ensemble, deep black bombazine, gloves, veil, and jet-beaded brooch that reads, "In Memoriam." It's been nearly a year since her husband died, but the costume of grief lingers. It must. Rules are rules. You sit across from her on a chair so stiff it might as well be a bench at confession. She nods with the gravity of someone who has earned her sorrow. You reply with the gravity of someone who has not. And so begins the delicate ritual of mourning etiquette. In the Victorian era, grief was a choreography. A woman in mourning followed strict phases. Deep mourning, half mourning, and eventually return to colours. Each stage had its own timeline, its own fashion, and its own unspoken rules. Wear the wrong shade too soon, and you'd be accused of callousness. Wear it too long, and you'd risk being seen as theatrically tragic. Mrs. Fairley compliments the lilies in the vase. You thank her, though they're beginning to wilt. She sips her tea through the veil with practised elegance. You wonder if she can even taste it through the netting. I still feel him near, she whispers, especially when the clocks stop. You nod. What else can you do? There's no polite way to say, I'm not sure I'd miss a man that much. Because here's the truth. Victorian marriage is rarely about love. Sometimes there's affection. Often there's duty. Always there's structure. Marriage makes a woman visible, but only as part of someone else. You're not a complete person. You're someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother, never simply someone. Later, Mrs. Fairley speaks of her late husband's sensitive digestion, his dislike of noise, and his hatred of unseemly laughter. She says this fondly. You try to smile. It feels like swallowing stones. You want to ask her what it's like now, what it's like to be unclaimed, even for a while. Does the silence ever feel like freedom? Does she sleep better now that no one snores beside her? But you don't ask. You sip your tea, tepid and oversteeped, and murmur appropriate sympathies. The visit ends, as all Victorian visits do, with a curtsy and a murmured promise to write. She leaves behind a scent of lavender and coal smoke. You watch her descend the front steps, veil fluttering in the breeze like the wing of a caged bird. You return to your room and open your wardrobe. So many dresses. So many colours you're not allowed to wear until you're married. So many you're not allowed to wear again after you're widowed. You pick up a simple grey shawl, neutral, safe, the fashion of neither joy nor grief. Scholars still debate whether Victorian mourning culture helped women process loss, or merely trapped them in prolonged performance. Some widows wore black for decades, long after they were legally allowed to stop. Others transitioned out quickly, quietly, determined not to drown in ritual. You think about death more than you should, not because you crave it, but because it's always near. Cholera, tuberculosis, sepsis, a bad childbirth, a cold that turns ugly, one poor decision, one missed sign. The line between you and the next funeral is thinner than lace. In the hallway, you pass the family portrait again. Your father's stern expression, your mother's distant gaze, your own painted likeness. Stiff, prim, eyes too wide to be believed. You wonder what people will say about you when you're gone. She kept a neat house. She embroidered roses. She never raised her voice. You return to your writing desk. Open your journal. Tonight, you write one question. What would I be if no one watched? You hear it before you see it. A rhythmic clatter, like an impatient clock echoing down the street. You rush to the window and pull back the curtain. It's the delivery cart from the dressmakers, and with it, possibility, new fabric, new orders, new gowns. For some, that's thrilling. For you, it's complicated. You make your way to the foyer as the parcels are brought in, each wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Your mother is already inspecting them, pinching the corners like she's testing fruit at the market. She motions for you to join her. Your fitting is this afternoon, she says. You nod. Of course it is, because today you are a client, a patron of fine fashion, a woman with measurements and preferences, or at least the illusion of them. At the dressmakers, the air smells like starch and tallow candles. Bolts of fabric drape over every surface. Cotton, muslin, silk if you're fortunate. You're greeted by Madame Renard, who isn't French but pretends well enough. She smiles with her teeth only and ushers you behind the curtain. A corset is already waiting, not yours. One of the shops, slightly too tight and laced by a girl with more fingers than tact. You lift your arms as instructed. The tape measure snakes round your bust, waist and hips, marking you in numbers like livestock. The measurements are written in a little notebook, your body reduced to figures. Then comes the dress. They slip the mock-up over your head. It's plain muslin now, but eventually it will be taffeta, or satin, or worsted wool if budgets are tight. You stare at your reflection. The seams pinch in the wrong places, the neckline's too low, the sleeves bunch oddly. Your mother frowns. Madame Renard nods as if this is a puzzle to solve, not a person to consider. There's discussion about skirt length, about bustle shape, about whether green makes you look too pale. You're consulted technically, but not really. Your opinions are filtered through your station. A working-class woman would never be offered choices. A lady may be offered the illusion of them, but the dress must still please others. Your suitor, perhaps, your family, society, and somewhere beneath all that fabric is you. Fun fact, in the Victorian era, women's clothing could weigh up to 20 pounds. Between corsets, petticoats, bustles, and outer garments, simply walking was an exercise in endurance. Experts still debate whether fashion was an oppressive force or a subtle expression of identity. Some women used dress as rebellion, shortening skirts, loosening sleeves. Others conformed tightly, seeing beauty as their only allowed form of power. As the fitting ends, Madame Renard tells you the final gown will be ready next week. You'll be radiant, she says, gently patting your shoulder like a seamstress blessing a mannequin. You leave the shop in a daze, feet sore, ribs tight, arms full of promise. You're not sure what kind of promise, the kind that glows or the kind that weighs. Back home you fold the fitting notes into your vanity drawer. You stare at the sketches of your gown. You imagine yourself wearing it, standing at a party, smiling at strangers, hoping no one notices your shoes are too tight. And then you imagine something else. A dress made of linen, plain, comfortable, with pockets. You imagine running in it. You imagine sweating in it. You imagine laughing, loud, unladylike, without a hand covering your mouth. You shake the image away. You put the notes in a box and close the lid. The dress will be lovely. That's what matters, isn't it? The air in the factory is different, thick, oily, and edged with a metallic tang that clings to your clothes. You've come here not as a visitor, but as an observer. You're accompanying a cousin, or perhaps volunteering with a charitable ladies' group that checks on the poor. Either way, this is not your usual world, but it's still your world, because these women, these girls, are you, just with fewer curtains and more bruises. The textile mill hums with relentless rhythm, like a giant iron heart. Girls no older than 14 work the looms, their fingers flying, their eyes darting from thread to needle to thread again. No one speaks. The sound of the machinery is too loud for that. The floorboards tremble underfoot. The air is warm, not with comfort, but with the heat of bodies and steam. One girl sneezes. No one reacts. She wipes her nose on her sleeve and keeps weaving. You watch as another girl reaches too far, too fast, and catches her knuckle on a spindle. She flinches but doesn't stop. Blood blooms on her apron like a crimson button. She tucks her hand behind her and keeps going. You swallow hard. This is not the parlour, this is not the garden, this is the machinery of empire. Fun fact. In 1851, over half of the textile workforce in Britain was female. Many were under 20. Working 12-hour shifts 6 days a week was normal. If they were injured, they were often blamed for carelessness. If they complained, they were dismissed. A supervisor walks past, adjusting his cuffs. He says nothing. The girls don't even glance up. You move into the next room, one filled with dye vats. The smell is worse here, chemical, heady. Girls stand waist-deep in tubs, stirring fabric with poles as long as brooms. Their hands are stained blue, their faces are pale. One coughs, and you see the pink of blood on her lip. Experts still debate whether Victorian industrialists truly believed they were lifting women out of poverty, or simply exploiting desperation under the guise of opportunity. Some claimed work gave women independence, others quietly celebrated how little they had to pay them. You ask a girl, barely 15, how long she's worked here. "Since Mam died," she says flatly. You ask how she stands the heat, the noise, the pain. "I just do," she replies. "Better than the workhouse." You nod, unsure what else to say. When you leave the mill, the air outside feels thin, almost weak. You rub your hands together, still feeling the vibrations of the floorboards beneath your skin. Back home, you look at your own hands, clean, unscarred, soft from soaps and silence. And you feel two things at once, gratitude and guilt. You sit at your writing desk that night and open your journal. You write, "If I had been born there, I would not be writing this." And that's the truth. Your life, for all its constraints, still allows for paper, ink, time. Theirs doesn't. And yet, they work. They endure. They laugh sometimes when the overseer isn't looking. One of them winked at you on your way out. You didn't know what it meant, but it stayed with you. Perhaps even here, under soot and steam and sorrow, women find ways to remain human. You close your journal and stare out the window. The factory's smokestack is still visible in the distance, a grey column against the fading pink sky. You watch it for a long time. Tonight, you attend a lecture at the town hall, not as a scholar, of course, but as a body in a bonnet seated quietly beside your mother. The speaker is a gentleman, older, moustached, enthusiastic. His topic? The moral hygiene of the British Empire. You're expected to be impressed. The hall is draughty and packed. Men sit in the front rows, legs sprawled, whispering confidently. Women are peppered toward the back, straight-backed and still, like punctuation marks in a sentence no one plans to read aloud. The lecture begins with a discussion of temperance, discipline, virtue. Naturally, women are at the centre of it all, but not as thinkers, as subjects, as tools. The gentleman on stage explains how the moral fibre of the nation depends on female modesty, domesticity, and curiously well-aired bedrooms. You glance sideways. Your mother nods along. You try to look interested. Then comes the part about fallen women. He uses the term like it's scientific, pointing to a chart that shows rising urban populations and declining female virtue. He says immodesty breeds immorality, and the crowd murmurs with approval. You grip the edge of your chair. You know what he means. Prostitutes, shopgirls, actresses, widows who remarry too quickly, daughters who sneak out at dusk, women who, in one way or another, fail to behave. The room nods again, as if sin were contagious and could be caught by touching a doorknob in Whitechapel. Victorian society doesn't just tolerate the sexual double standard, it canonises it. A man's indiscretion is a minor blemish. A woman's is a death sentence. Literally sometimes. Fun fact, the Contagious Diseases Acts, 1860s to 80s, allowed police to detain women suspected of prostitution, forcibly examine them and imprison them if deemed unclean. No warrant required, no male suspects ever subjected to the same. You think of that girl at the mill, the one who winked at you. You think of the housemaid, with the fading bruise. You think of yourself. How many mistakes would it take before you became one of these fallen women? One, maybe less. Experts still debate whether Victorian women accepted the purity standard or internally resisted it while publicly complying. Some found clever workarounds, writing under male pseudonyms, hosting salons, joining religious charities to move more freely. But many simply swallowed the shame until it wore down their teeth. The lecture ends to applause. You clap politely, heart pounding. The speaker bows. He's probably heading home to a warm meal and a wife who never interrupts him. That night at dinner, your father repeats one of the man's quotes about the sanctity of the hearth. He looks to you for agreement. You nod and refill his teacup. The performance is perfect. Afterward, you walk alone in the garden. The sky's pale. The moon is low. You think about the stories you've heard. Whispers of women who ran away. One who joined a theatre troupe. One who joined a convent. One who opened a bookstore in Glasgow and never came back. You don't know if any of them were real, but you think about them anyway. You reach the far corner of the garden where no one can see. You lift your skirt a few inches and step in the muddy patch near the wall. You don't know why. Maybe just to feel that you can. You feel it before you see it. That subtle shift in the air when eyes start to follow you. You're not doing anything unusual, just walking down the high street with your cousin, gloves on, parasol in hand, skirts brushing the cobblestones. But the glances are there, not from women, from men. You lower your gaze as taught. You keep your smile neutral as trained. But you feel it, that strange sensation of being seen and dismissed at the same time. Admired, maybe. Assessed, certainly, but never listened to. Your cousin, bolder than you, lifts her chin and meets their gaze. One man tips his hat. She blushes. You do not. Not because you aren't flattered, but because you know exactly what this is. Victorian women live under a kind of constant surveillance, not just from the law or the church or the household, from everyone, especially other women. There's always someone watching, scanning your hemline, your posture, your conversation. Did you laugh too loudly at supper? Did you take your gloves off too early? Did your smile linger too long? One slip, and your name joins the whispers. In the dressmaker's queue, the woman behind you comments to her friend that Miss Summers has been seen walking alone near the tobacconist. Such a shame, they say, as if they've already sewn a scarlet letter onto her shawl. Fun fact, Even reading the wrong books could make you suspect. Gothic novels, romantic verse, radical essays, all viewed as dangerous for female minds. Some libraries maintained lists of works deemed unsuitable for young ladies. Jane Austen, acceptable. Mary Shelley, questionable. Anything French, risky. You and your cousin stop in at the booksellers. The man behind the counter nods politely but steers you toward appropriate selections. You flip through a collection of sermons. Your cousin reaches for a volume of poetry and is immediately warned it might be too affecting. She buys it anyway, she always does. Experts still debate whether Victorian women internalised this scrutiny or quietly rebelled beneath it. Certainly many obeyed outwardly, but journals and letters reveal private struggles, cracks beneath the porcelain exterior, little rebellions refusing to curtsy, sneaking off to read Shelley by candlelight, writing, even anonymously, you buy nothing. Outside, the air smells of horses and coal smoke. You adjust your bonnet and glance up at the row of windows above the shops. Curtains flutter, eyes watch, always. When you get home, you find a note on your vanity, an anonymous card, unsigned, tucked beneath your brush. You are seen at the booksellers, alone. You stare at it, you laugh, just once. A short, sharp breath that startles even you. Then you tear the note in half and into half again and again until it's nothing but confetti in your palm. You let it fall to the floor and leave it there. For once you want someone else to do the sweeping. Black crepe drapes the mirrors. The clocks have all been stopped. The parlour curtains are drawn, though it's midday, and the air smells faintly of dust and lilies. Someone has died. It wasn't a surprise, really. Your great-uncle had been fading for months. Still, when the news came, everything changed with a swift, hushed finality. A ripple of ritual began at once. No wailing, no keening, just quiet efficiency. Death here is not chaotic. It's choreographed. Your mother is already in mourning dress. Black silk, full sleeves, veil pulled down just enough to blur the outline of her face. You follow suit, your own dress borrowed and slightly too tight across the shoulders. You fasten the jet brooch at your throat. It's cold against your skin. Victorian mourning customs are exhaustive. Every detail has rules. Jewellery must be black or not at all. Correspondence sealed with black-edged envelopes. Gloves, of course, must match. Women mourn longer than men. Widows mourn longer than daughters. Even sorrow has a social hierarchy. You're not sure what you feel. The uncle in question rarely spoke to you, but that's not relevant. You mourn as instructed. Your grief is not measured by your heart. It's measured by your hemlines. The maid lowers her gaze when she enters the room, as if she's apologising for being alive. The house is quieter than ever. Even the dog seems subdued. Meals are smaller, conversation is thinner, and still the expectations persist. You must write letters. You must receive visitors. You must sit solemn and well lit, in case anyone drops by with condolences. Fun fact. Some Victorians paid photographers to take portraits of their deceased loved ones, propped upright, eyes painted open. It was often the only photo they'd ever have. Some even hosted elaborate mourning portraits with the whole family in full black, flanking the body like it was a wedding. You've never seen one in person, but you once caught sight of one in a drawer. It haunted you. The little boy's eyes were painted so wide they looked surprised to be dead. A few days into mourning, you attend the funeral. Black carriages, rain, slippery cobblestones. The minister speaks of eternal peace. You think of your aunt's garden, how she used to say her husband would haunt the petunias if she didn't plant them properly. You don't laugh, but you almost do. After the burial, the ladies gather for a quiet tea, no sweets. Sugar is for joy. The talk is soft, distant. Someone mentions death as God's will. Someone else says, he had a good life. No one asks what makes a life good. Back home, you return to the routine, but slower now. Mourning changes the pace of everything. You're not meant to attend dances or sing or wear anything brighter than slate grey. You feel like a shadow of yourself. But maybe that's the point. Experts still debate whether Victorian mourning customs were a genuine outlet for grief or just another layer of control. Some women embraced them. Others found the rules suffocating. But all of them followed. To do otherwise would be scandalous. You sit by the fire that night wrapped in your mourning shawl. You glance down at the black stitching on your hem and realise it looks like a boundary line. You imagine stepping over it, just once. You're pale, you're quiet, you're composed, and today, apparently, You are beautiful. At least that's what the governor says when you descend the stairs. She beams, clutching her hands to her chest. You look just like a painting, she coos. So delicate. You smile because you're supposed to, but inwardly you flinch, because what she means, what they all mean, is that you look like you could faint at any moment, and that's a compliment. Victorian beauty standards are not just demanding, they are absurd. Your skin must be porcelain pale, not from makeup, but from never stepping into sunlight. Freckles are unsightly. Tans suggest you work outdoors like a servant. Your cheeks may have a natural flush if it suggests demure embarrassment, but not if it suggests passion or exercise. Your waist? Tiny. Unrealistically so. Enough to encircle with a pair of man's hands, or better yet a ribbon. Corsetry isn't just expected, it's worshipped. The hourglass figure is not just fashionable, it's symbolic. Curves in just the right places, squeezed out of ribs and lungs if need be. You try not to wheeze as you sit down to breakfast. Today's meal includes a suitor, Mr. Allerton, 27, comfortable income, good teeth, doesn't chew too loudly, all promising signs. You've been placed across from him at the table like a prize roast. He compliments your delicate complexion. You thank him, suppressing the urge to sneeze. The coal smoke is thick this morning and you think your lungs might actually be collapsing. Maybe that's good. Maybe fainting would make you look more ethereal. Fun fact. Some women faked fainting. It was a social strategy, a way to escape awkward encounters, avoid difficult questions, or gain sympathy. The Victorian woman wasn't just meant to look fragile. She was expected to weaponize that fragility. You excuse yourself after breakfast and take your parasol out for a gentle constitutional, a polite euphemism for walking slowly and being seen doing it. You're not meant to sweat. You're not meant to move with purpose. Your feet are supposed to appear small, even if your shoes are excruciating. You pass other ladies doing the same, all pale, all silent, all stepping as if the ground might bruise. One stumbles. Her maid catches her. Everyone pretends not to notice. Experts still debate whether Victorian beauty ideals were embraced or endured. Some argue that women found power in appearances, leveraging desirability for influence. Others say it was just another leash disguised in lace. You stop by the reflecting pond and peer into it. Your face looks serene, but you know the truth. Your corset is biting into your hip bone, your right shoe is pinching your toe, and you're so hungry your stomach sounds like distant thunder. Still, you turn slightly, adjusting your angle in the water's reflection. Because someone might be watching, and if they are, you must be perfect. That night your sister sighs as she undoes her hair. "Do you think we'll ever get to be ugly?" she asks, only half joking. You shrug. "Only if we get very rich," you whisper. She laughs. A soft, wheezy laugh that sounds like rebellion. You both go to bed with pins still stuck in your sleeves and the scent of lavender powder lingering like a false memory. You dream of running barefoot down a muddy path, hair loose, cheeks sunburned, dress torn. And in the dream, you are more beautiful than ever. You wake to a headache. Not the dull kind from poor sleep, but the pointed, pulsing kind that sits behind your eyes like a judgment. Your vision swims as you rise, and the light slicing through the curtains feels like an accusation. You press a cold cloth to your forehead and breathe through your mouth, trying not to heave. There's no name for this in your household, just a spell, just delicate nerves. Downstairs, no one comments. That's the rule. You may be faint, feverish, even incoherent. But so long as your napkin is folded neatly and your voice remains gentle, no one will name it. No one will offer comfort, because Victorian women are not meant to be unwell in public, only poetic, only pale. By mid-morning, you're not better, but you're expected to attend your scheduled engagement, a charity tea for fallen women hosted by the vicar's wife. You do not feel well enough for moral superiority, but you dress and go anyway. You arrive to the scent of oversteeped Earl Grey and condescension. The room is full of ladies in grey gloves and high collars, sipping tea and discussing the spiritual dangers of working girls. "We must guide them," one woman insists, "back to decency." You glance at the girls in question, lined up near the back wall like furniture on display. Most are no older than 16. A few smile faintly. Most look down at their shoes. Their dresses are clean but coarse, their hair braided with effort. You see no indecency, just exhaustion. The vicar's wife calls for a hymn. Everyone stands. You rise too, though your knees wobble. The The song is slow, cloying, and full of the word purity. Your throat burns. When it ends, polite applause flutters like moths. Later, in the carriage home, your mother remarks that your cheeks are flushed. "That little fever must be passing," she says brightly. You don't respond, because the truth is far messier than fever. You're angry. You're angry at the room full of judgment, at the young girls turned into lessons, at yourself for not speaking, and most of all at the slow erosion of your voice. You once had opinions, you remember that. As a child, you were full of questions. Why are boys allowed to run? Why can't I read that book? Why does no one talk about Aunt Lillian? But over the years, those questions thinned, whittled away by raised eyebrows and quiet punishments. Now, you mostly ask yourself, will anyone notice if I stop speaking altogether? Fun fact. The diagnosis of hysteria was once so common that by the 19th century it was applied to nearly any behaviour considered abnormal in women. Irritability, ambition, insomnia, sexual desire, disinterest in housework. It became a catch-all term, used not to understand women, but to dismiss them. Experts still debate whether doctors sincerely believed in hysteria or simply used it to reinforce existing social roles. Either way, thousands of women were subjected to bizarre treatments, from cold baths to forced seclusion to electrical stimulation, without ever being asked, "What are you feeling?" You return home and head directly to your room. You close the door and sit at your vanity, staring at your own face in the glass. You do not look hysterical. You look calm, normal, fine. But your throat aches with unsaid things. You pick up your journal, dip your pen in ink, and begin to write. Not facts, not observations, but fury. Unedited, inelegant, full-throated. You write, "I am tired of being soft. I am tired of being small. I want to be a noise that cannot be ignored." The ink runs in one corner, smudged by a falling tear. You don't wipe it. Instead, you keep writing. Because someone has to. Sunday, the Sabbath, a day of peace, at least in theory. You rise early to prepare. Your dress must be extra modest today. No bright colours, no lace frills, no jewellery except the mourning brooch you've worn since your uncle passed. Your gloves are plain cotton, your bonnet low-brimmed. You look like a ghost of yourself. Fitting, perhaps. The family walks together to church. You do not speak. No one does. Not out of reverence, but routine. Your shoes crunch against the gravel path as bells toll overhead. Heavy, hollow notes that make your bones vibrate. Inside the church, the air smells of wax, stone, and starch. You take your place in the pew like an obedient chess piece, hands folded, back straight. The minister's voice echoes through the nave, listing sins like inventory, vanity, disobedience, pride, lust, ambition. You notice something as you listen. All the sins he names seem tailored to women. Women are vain. Women tempt. Women wander in mind and soul. Men sin by accident. Women sin by nature. The sermon turns to Eve. Again, always Eve. She disobeyed. She reached. She wanted. You know how the story ends. You look around. The men in their tailored jackets sit comfortable and unexamined. The women, layered in shawls and silence, sit small, heads bowed. Even in the Lord's house they take up less space. After the service you stand outside on the gravel path as others pass by. The vicar's wife smiles warmly and says she's praying for your continued modesty. You thank her. You do not ask what she's praying against. The truth is, religion here is not about heaven, it's about control. You think of the girls from the charity tea, of your aunt, fading into silence, of your own journals hidden under your pillow like contraband, and you wonder what would happen if the pulpit changed hands, if one of you stood up and spoke. Fun fact, some Victorian women did. Anne Knight, a Quaker, was among the earliest British suffragists. Others formed Bible study groups not to memorise scripture but to question it. And yet, for every rebel, a dozen more were taught to stay quiet and call that piety. Experts still debate whether religion empowered Victorian women through moral stature, or simply used them as symbols of purity to better suppress them. A handful of women found solace, many more found a cage wrapped in hymns. Back at home, Sunday continues with measured silence. No sewing, no dancing, no letters. Even laughter is considered inappropriate. You read a religious tract aloud to your mother, It's about obedience. Of course it is. In the afternoon, you're allowed to take a short walk, so long as it's slow, reflective, and observed. You stroll past hedgerows blooming with early summer buds and try not to resent the beauty. But it's hard, because you feel like a guest in a world that should have been yours. You reach a bench beneath a withered sycamore and sit. Your shoes are too tight again. You want to take them off, press your feet into the warm grass, stretch, yawn, exist without supervision. But someone is always watching, even when they're not. You whisper to yourself, God, are you watching too? And if you are, do you care what I'm wearing? A breeze rustles the trees. You don't expect an answer. Later that night you light a candle and read in bed, something unapproved hidden beneath your mattress. The story is about a woman who sails across the sea alone. She doesn't ask permission. She doesn't repent. She doesn't look back. You reach the last page and stare at it for a long time. Then you blow out the candle, lie back, and imagine what it would be like to believe in something that doesn't require you to disappear. You wake to rain tapping softly on the window pane, and for once the day feels blank. No tea visits, no fittings, no required public appearances. A rare day of pause, or what passes for one in your world. But the illusion doesn't last long. You're barely through your first spoonful of porridge when you're asked to deliver a parcel across town. It's just a little errand, they say, a short walk. You nod and wrap your shawl tight, knowing full well this is not about the parcel. It's about you, about watching you move properly through the world, like a test they haven't admitted is being graded. So out you go, into the grey drizzle, shoes already damp within 5 steps. The package under your arm is unremarkable, something for the seamstress perhaps, but its contents aren't the story here. The journey is. Because as you pass through streets and alleys, over flagstones slick with moss, you enter a part of town your family rarely speaks of, not because it's dangerous, though that's the whisper, but because it's untidy. Too many voices, too many smells, too many truths. The rain grows heavier as you walk past storefronts in need of paint and shutters that never quite close. Women lean from windows, calling to children in thick dialects. A fishmonger shouts prices no one wants to pay. A boy spits on the ground and grins at you. You do not grin back. You tighten your grip on the parcel and press forward. Then, at the corner you pass her. She stands in the shadows, wrapped in faded velvet, lips rouged too brightly for this dull day. A painted lady. A fallen woman. A prostitute by any name. She meets your eyes, not shy, not bold, just direct, and something passes between you, like a ripple in a still pond. She doesn't look ruined. She looks awake. Victorian society would condemn her in every possible way. The law, the church, the whispers behind every teacup. But there she stands, whole and real and radiantly unapologetic. You're not sure if you admire her or envy her, or both. Fun fact. In the 1850s, London had an estimated 80,000 sex workers. Many entered the trade out of desperation, widowed, orphaned, or simply out of options. And yet, despite the scorn they faced, some earned more money and freedom than the factory girls or governesses ever would. You deliver the parcel and turn to go back, but your pace is slower now, your mind louder. Experts still debate whether sex work in the Victorian era granted women a form of independence or simply exposed them to new layers of exploitation. The answer is both. Power in survival, power in risk, but always power earned at a cost. Back home, you return drenched and scolded. You must be more careful where you wander, they say, dabbing at your sleeves. You nod and say nothing about the woman on the corner, but that night in your journal you write, "She stood there like she owned her name. I don't even get to choose mine." You pause, staring at the ink, then add, "I don't know if I want to be her, but I know I don't want to be invisible anymore." And for the first time in a long time, your hand doesn't shake as you close the book. There's a hum in the parlour today, not of conversation, but of tension. A letter has arrived, heavy paper, wax seal, the kind of envelope that carries expectations more than news. Your mother opens it with practiced fingers. Her eyes flicker across the lines once, twice. Then she smiles. "It's from the Ashbournes," she says. "They've invited us for dinner next week." You nod, though your stomach turns. The Ashbournes are wealthy, old money. Their house smells like polished mahogany and judgment, and they have a son. You know where this is going. The week becomes a flurry of preparation. New ribbons, gloves cleaned, shoes shined. You are pressed, powdered, and prepared like a display piece. Another round in the endless carousel of marital positioning. And so, the night comes. The carriage rocks gently as you approach their estate. Candlelight flickers in every window, and a footman opens the door before your hand even touches the handle. You're greeted warmly, but not too warmly. Their smiles are measured. Every gesture is a performance, and you are already centre stage. Dinner is elaborate. Soup, fish, meat, pudding, course after course that you barely taste because your role is not to eat. Your role is to appear serene, grateful, desirable. Across from you sits Edwin Ashbourne. Pleasant hair, pleasant face, no opinion so far. He speaks of weather, dogs, and the latest improvements in drainage systems. You smile, nod, comment politely. Inside, you're screaming. After dinner, the women retreat to the drawing room. The men linger behind with cigars and port. You take your place on a fainting couch under a portrait of a woman who looks just like you, but from 50 years ago. Same posture, same gaze, same silence. One of the other ladies asks if Edwin seems promising. You smile demurely. He seems very kind, you say. It's a lie. He seems like wallpaper, but that's the correct answer. No woman ever got a proposal by saying she wanted a conversation partner. Later, he joins you in the garden for a chaperoned stroll. He offers his arm. You take it. He says something about stars. You murmur agreement. He tells you your eyes are very intelligent. You want to ask what that means. You don't. He says he's looking for a wife who can create a peaceful home. You nod, though the words feel like iron chains. Fun fact. In the Victorian era, once a woman married, she lost nearly all legal autonomy. Her property became her husband's. Her wages, if she earned any, did too. She couldn't sign contracts, own land, or even retain custody of her own children in most cases. Experts still debate whether courtship customs were romantic idealism or a refined method of female disempowerment. Either way, they worked. They shaped generations of women into agreeable wives and invisible individuals. You return to the parlour with Edwin. He smiles and says he hopes to see you again. You thank him. Everyone is pleased. That night, you remove your gloves slowly. Each finger feels like a verdict. You sit by the mirror and stare at your reflection. Do you love him? Number could you learn to? Maybe. That's what they always say. But do you want to? You don't answer. Instead, you open your journal and draw a garden. Not the one at the Ashbournes. Your own. Imaginary. Wild. Overgrown. No chaperones. No suitors. No expectations. You tuck the drawing inside the back cover, where no one will find it. Then you blow out the candle and lie down, the memory of Edwin's polite hands lingering on your sleeve like pollen. He didn't touch you, but he left a mark anyway. Your gloves are still damp from yesterday's dinner. They sit curled like dead things on your vanity, the fingers twisted from nervous fidgeting. You haven't touched them since returning from the Ashbournes. You're not sure you will again. This morning your mother is humming, always a dangerous sign. She's folding napkins into tulips and tapping her foot with uncharacteristic energy. We'll be hosting, she says brightly. Just a small gathering. Edwin may call. The word may hangs in the air like a guillotine on a slow drop. You nod and smile. It's all choreography now. You help plan the luncheon. You polish the silver. You arrange the flowers just so. None of this is optional. It is your debut, your duty, your quiet descent into a life no one asked you to choose but everyone expects you to accept. You begin to wonder what would happen if you said no, not in a grand speech, just quietly. No, I don't want this. No, I won't sit. No, I don't care what Edwin thinks of my embroidery, but you don't. You can't. Not because you're weak, but because you know what happens to women who don't comply. They get labelled, locked away, married off quicker, to worse men, to silence the scandal of their resistance. And yet the thought persists. After lunch you sneak off. Just a walk, just a moment alone. You head toward the edge of the estate where the stone wall borders the neighbouring field. There's a tree there. Old, crooked, welcoming. You lean against it and breathe. Just breathe. Then you hear her. Climbing trees again? You spin around. It's Louisa. You haven't seen her in years. Your childhood friend, the daughter of your former governess. She was sent away when you were 12. Too bold, too clever. Rumours said she took work as a lady's companion. Rumours also said she read French novels in secret and once slapped a suitor. Now she stands before you in a plain blue dress, hair windblown, eyes sharp. "Didn't expect to see you here," she says. You explain, you laugh, you lie. A little. Louisa grins. "Still playing the game?" You shrug. "What choice do I have?" She sighs. "More than you think, less than you deserve." You talk, you walk. You remember who you used to be. Two girls with scraped knees and big dreams, playing at queens and witches, long before corsets and courtship. Louisa tells you she never married, works as a teacher now, lives in a boarding house where women share books and sometimes opinions. "It's not glamorous," she says, "but it's mine." You want to cry, but you laugh instead. Then you tell her about Edwin. She wrinkles her nose. "Let me guess. Nice teeth, no imagination." You smile. Accurate. Before she leaves, she pulls a small pamphlet from her bag. Thin, printed on cheap paper. It's a suffrage leaflet. You take it. Fun fact. By the 1870s, women's suffrage movements had gained momentum in Britain. Though most women wouldn't get the vote until 1918, and not all until 1928, the roots were already growing, quietly, persistently, through pamphlets, meetings, and conversations like this. Experts still debate how many Victorian women supported these causes, and how many feared the consequences of being aligned with them. But change always begins in whispers. You tuck the pamphlet into your pocket and walk home slowly. Back in your room, you hide it in your journal. You don't read it yet, but you will, soon. And for the first time in days, when you look at yourself in the mirror, you don't see someone waiting to be chosen. You see someone choosing. The pamphlet stays hidden for 3 days. Tucked between journal pages, behind a pressed fern you once saved from a spring walk when you were still allowed to roam. You think of it constantly. You don't touch it. Not because you're afraid of paper, because you're afraid of what it might start. Then, one afternoon, after an especially dull hour of practicing thank you notes in your best slanting hand, you reach for it. The print is small, smudged in places. The title reads, "The Rights of Women, a call for participation." It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, persuasive, sharp. It speaks of education, property, the vote. But more than that, it speaks of voice. You read the entire thing twice. When you finish, your heart is thudding. Not from fear, but recognition. It doesn't feel rebellious. It feels like being reminded of something you already knew, but had been taught to forget. You hide it again, but more carefully this time. Not because you want to keep it secret, but because it feels precious. Like an ember. One breath too hard, and it might go out. Later that week, you overhear your father discussing a bill in Parliament. Something about land inheritance and women's meddling. He scoffs. What's next? Women voting on taxes they don't even pay? You say nothing. You stir your tea. But inside, something sharp uncoils. You don't confront him. Not yet. But that night, you take out your journal and write in bolder letters than usual. If my opinion is so dangerous, why are they so afraid of it? The next morning you sneak out early under the guise of returning a borrowed handkerchief. But your real destination is the edge of the village, an old shop that sells second-hand books and, very quietly, printed materials from ladies' societies. The woman behind the counter is older, grey-haired but sharp-eyed. She says nothing as you browse, just nods when you finally approach with a tiny bundle of pamphlets tied in ribbon. "Careful where you read them," she says. "The paper's cheap, but the ideas aren't." You tuck the bundle inside your muff and walk home through fog. On the way, you pass the tailor's shop, the baker, the chapel. Everything looks the same, but you feel different. Taller, maybe, or just more awake. Fun fact, early feminist literature in the Victorian era often circulated unofficially, passed hand to hand, read in drawing rooms under pretense of embroidery circles. Though censored in some places, ideas still found ways to spread. Because ideas, like weeds, don't need permission to grow. Experts still debate how many women truly wanted systemic change, and how many simply wanted room to breathe. But even small cracks in the system eventually weaken the wall. That night you hide your new pamphlets inside the false bottom of your sewing box. Then you sit by the fire and begin reading again, lips moving silently to words that were never meant for parlours. Later, your mother asks what you've been working on. You hold up a piece of embroidery. It reads, "I am not delicate, I am deliberate." She frowns. "That's not a quote from scripture." "No," you say softly, "it's not." She says nothing else. But for the first time, you wonder if she sees you, really sees you, and for the first time, you don't look away. You're in the parlour again. It's Thursday, which means lacework and quiet conversation about things that don't matter. The fire is low, the biscuits are soft, and you are surrounded by women whose lives look just like yours, but rarely feel that way. They're chatting about Mrs. Pembroke's daughter, who scandalously refused a proposal. "He had an estate," one woman clucks, as if that were the only credential that ever mattered. Another leans in. "I heard she wants to write." Imagine, writing, with her name on the cover. The laughter that follows is polite but sharp, like lace cut with scissors. You press your needle into your embroidery hoop a little harder than necessary. Your stitches are tight, intentional. They don't say graceful, they say unapologetic. When your turn to speak comes, you simply say, "Maybe she'll be the first to write something we actually want to read." The room goes quiet. Then, as if nothing happened, someone asks if anyone has more chamomile. It's always like this. Your small truths dropped like pebbles into still water. You watch the ripples, but no one ever acknowledges the splash. Later that afternoon you escape to the library. Not the Grand City one, of course. You'd never be allowed alone. But the little side room in your own home where the books are mostly sermons and historical treatises written by men. Still, you find what you need. You pull a volume from the shelf. Plutarch's Lives. You don't read the biography. You use it to hide the newest pamphlet from the Society for Rational Women. Inside are short essays by women whose names don't appear on the spines of any books in your father's collection. But their voices are sharp, witty, determined. One writes about freedom like it's a garment you can tailor. Another compares domestic life to a ship's galley. Efficient, confining, always one storm away from ruin. You copy one paragraph into your journal. It begins. "A woman is not born with silence in her blood. She is taught it, line by line." You underline it. Twice. Fun fact. Many early feminist writers wrote anonymously or under male pseudonyms. Even Mary Ann Evans, who we now know as George Eliot, hid behind a man's name to ensure her work would be taken seriously. And she wasn't alone. Some wrote for decades without public acknowledgement, only rediscovered long after their deaths. Experts still debate whether anonymity was protective or limiting, whether it allowed freer speech or simply reinforced the idea that women's voices were only valid when hidden. You sit by the window and stare at the clouds drifting low across the fields. You wonder how many ideas were lost in silence, how many brilliant women wrote entire novels in their heads and never told a soul. You wonder what it might be like to put your name on something and not apologise for it. That night you begin a letter, not to a person, but to the future. You write, "If you're reading this, I hope you can speak without flinching. I hope you can laugh without fear. I hope you can say no without explanation. I hope the price I paid helped lower the cost for you. You don't know who it's for. Maybe your daughter, maybe someone else's, maybe no one. But it still feels like the first honest thing you've ever mailed to the world, even if it never leaves your drawer. Your shoes are scuffed, not from dancing, not from errands, from walking, long walks, secret ones, quiet ones. You've been leaving the house more often now, never for long, never without some excuse in your apron pocket, but the real reason is always the same. Air, space, a sliver of yourself reclaimed, one footstep at a time. You've memorised the back paths, past the orchard, through the thinning hedge, behind the garden wall where the roses grow wild. You walk with your skirts lifted ever so slightly, not modestly but practically. You listen to the wind and the sparrows and the distant whistle of the train, and for brief moments it almost feels like freedom. But freedom in this world is a tricky thing. Today when you return, you're called to the sitting room. Your mother is waiting with a letter on her lap and a furrow between her brows. "Mr. Allerton has written," she says. Of course he has. She unfolds the letter with care as if it might be sacred. The contents are as expected. He found your conversation pleasant, your manners appropriate, your posture exemplary. He seeks to continue the acquaintance. His tone is warm, dull, respectful to a fault. "I think this is very promising," your mother says. You nod, slowly. Because what do you say to that? You already know how this ends. Not with fire or fury, with politeness, with rings, with phrases like dutiful wife and excellent match. The path ahead is paved in well-intentioned cages. That evening, you sit alone by the fire and reread your journal. The entries have changed. Less observation, more intention. Less echo, more voice. You find the one you wrote weeks ago. What would I be if no one watched? You add beneath it. Someone else entirely. You stare into the flames. You try to imagine a life where you aren't measured, weighed, named by others. Not as wife, not as daughter, not as potential, just as you. But the train keeps whistling in the distance and the hours pass and morning will come. With it, expectations. Fun fact, marriage in the Victorian era was not just personal, it was economic. For many families, daughters were investments. A good match could elevate a household, a bad one could destroy it, and women, for all their embroidery and education, had little say once the machinery began. Experts still debate whether women like you, gentle-born, middle-class, respectable, had more freedom than the factory girls or maids. In some ways, yes. In other ways, you were simply imprisoned in softer rooms. You take out a fresh sheet of paper. You begin a letter to Mr. Allerton. You start, "Dear Sir," then stop, then tear it in half, then write another one, this time to Louisa. "I've read the pamphlets. I want more." You pause. "I want to help." You sign your name, clearly, unapologetically. Then fold it, seal it, and tuck it beneath your coat. You'll mail it tomorrow. On the way to the baker's. No one will notice. Or maybe they will. Maybe they'll talk. Let them. Because you're not just walking anymore. You're moving. The rain has stopped. You wake to a sky scraped clean. Pale, almost white, like the quiet before someone makes a decision they can't take back. You dress without ceremony. No ribbons, no perfume. Just layers you can walk in. You tie your boots tight, gather your shawl and slip the letter to Louisa into your pocket. It presses against your hip as if to say, "Let's go." You take the long way to the post, past the bakery with its golden windows, past the milliner's with her stiffly posed hats in the display, past the schoolyard, where children run without corsets or caution. You pass a girl jumping rope in the mud. She trips, falls, and laughs. No one tells her not to. At the edge of the village, you post the letter. Your hand lingers a moment too long on the cold iron of the box. Then you drop it through. One simple act. No witnesses, no applause, just gravity. And yet, you walk away feeling lighter. Back at home, the house is oddly quiet. Your mother is in the sewing room. Your father is out. The maid nods as you pass. You nod back. You think she notices something's different. Or maybe she just hopes you do. You retreat to your room and pull out your journal, no longer hidden, just resting where you left it. Today, you don't write a secret. You write a plan. You've decided to start something. A circle, maybe. A study group. Nothing dangerous. Just a few girls with questions. A few books no one approves of. Some paper, some ink, a table. It doesn't sound like much. But it is. Because in this world, gathering women to think together is radical. Not loud, not violent, but revolutionary all the same. Fun fact. By the late 19th century, countless small women's groups were meeting in drawing rooms, kitchens, even laundries, reading, organising, supporting each other. Many began with tea, many ended with votes. Experts still debate how effective these early groups were. But they missed the point. The power wasn't just in legislation. It was in gathering, in belonging. You stare out the window, the trees are turning, not fully autumn yet, but close. The leaves are unsure of themselves. Red around the edges, green still clinging at the core. Like you. You close the journal and press your palm to the cover. A book of days, a record of survival, of sorrow, of breath. Then you hear a knock. When you open the door, it's your sister. She looks at you strangely. "What did you write?" she asks. "You looked so certain." You hand her the journal, she opens it and reads. And when she's done, she doesn't say a word. She just nods. That night, as the lamps flicker and the fire dips low, you gather your shawl and step out into the garden. The air is cool, the moon is high, you walk barefoot through the grass just once, just for a minute. No one stops you, and you whisper to the night, "I am not a footnote." Then you go inside and rest. You arrive early and alone, not to church, not to tea. to the old coach house behind the florist's shop. It's dark inside except for one lantern. A table has been set, nothing elaborate, just crates for chairs, a pot of weak tea, a plate of stale scones. But what surrounds it is rare and bright and alive. Women, only 5 of them. Louisa's there, of course. The others are a blur of corsets, wind-chapped hands, and eyes that have seen too much to be fooled anymore. No one claps, no one makes introductions. It's not that kind of meeting. You sit, you breathe, you listen. The first to speak is Mrs. Finch, a widow who teaches arithmetic in a town that doesn't believe girls need it. She talks about wages, about how she earns less than half what a male tutor makes, even though she teaches double the students. No one is surprised. Then comes Marion, a laundress who's lost 3 sisters to childbirth. One of them died, she says, because the doctor wouldn't come unless father paid first. Her voice doesn't break, but yours almost does. Then a girl named Elsie, 16, works as a kitchen maid, can't read, but wants to. She leans in as Louisa offers her a pamphlet. You see her fingers tremble as she takes it. No one here is grand, no one here is safe, but together they are something close to dangerous. You finally speak. You talk about the dinner with the Ashbournes, about Mr. Allerton, about the pamphlet, about the journal, about how you're tired of being careful. The women nod, not because they're shocked, because they remember. Fun fact, many women's rights groups in the Victorian era operated as unofficial salons, sewing circles, or even literary clubs, hidden in plain sight. Under the guise of refinement, they shared banned essays, discussed speeches, and planned quiet revolutions. Experts still debate the impact of these gatherings. Some say they were ineffective without legal power. Others argue they were vital, planting seeds where laws had not yet grown. Louisa pulls out a handbill. A women's meeting. Public. In the city. It's small, she says. Discreet. But real. You feel the air shift. To attend would be bold. To speak would be risky. To be seen would be unforgettable. The group falls quiet. No pressure. No push. But you know this is a door. Later that night you walk home slower than usual. Not from dread. From weight. From knowing something now you didn't know before. You are not alone. And for the first time your silence feels like a decision, not a default. At home, you write a new sentence in your journal. The others are out there, waiting, and they sound like me. The wind outside howls against the shutters as you light your lamp. It's late. Too late for polite writing, too late for safe thoughts. But tonight, neither of those concerns you. You've made your decision. You're going to attend the meeting in the city. You pack your bag quietly. Just a scarf, gloves, your journal, a few coins. You pin your hair tighter than usual like armour. You tell your family you're visiting a cousin. You smile as you lie. Women lie beautifully when they have to. The train pulls out of the station just after dawn. The cars are cold and mostly empty. A few men snore behind newspapers. One woman knits beside a child who won't stop coughing. No one pays you any mind. You're a shadow in wool. When you arrive, the city hums. Not with industry, though the factories smoke and the carts rattle, but with something else. Movement. Potential. Like a spark right before it leaps. You find the hall down a narrow street past a butcher's and a shoe repair shop. It's modest. Paint peeling. But inside you hear voices. Low. Urgent. Alive. The meeting has already begun. A woman stands at the front, hair streaked with grey, back straight as steel. She's speaking about reform bills and voting rights and workplace protections. But it's not just her words, it's the way the women listen, the way they lean forward, scribble notes, murmur agreement, not out of duty, but conviction. You sit in the back, quiet at first, until someone says it. The biggest threat to change isn't power, it's silence. You feel it then, that electric pull, and before you can think, your hand is raised. They call on you. You rise, your knees shake, your throat catches, but you speak. You tell them you were taught to be invisible. You tell them about embroidery circles and fake fainting and polite dinners that felt like funerals. You tell them about Louisa, about the pamphlet, about the corner of the journal where your real voice lives. You expect them to smile kindly and move on. Instead, they applaud, not politely, earnestly. And in that moment, you realize something astonishing. Your voice, small as it feels, matters. Fun fact? In the 1880s and 90s, countless local women's clubs and political unions formed across Britain. Some public, others underground. Women gave speeches, published essays, protested laws, and slowly reshaped the public's perception of what they were capable of. Experts still debate how much one speech could change a life, but for you, the question is already answered. You leave the meeting flushed, breathless. Louisa is waiting at the corner. "You did it," she says. You nod. "I didn't think I could." She grins. That's how you know it mattered. On the train home, the city fades behind you, but the words stay. You're not going back to who you were. At home, the fire is low. Your mother asks about your cousin. You say, "She's doing well," which is not a lie. That night, you open your journal. You write, "Today I was not a lady. I was a voice, a risk, a woman," and then you sleep. It's late autumn now. The air has turned sharp, the sky pale and steady like a held breath. The trees are nearly bare, and the garden, once so fussed over, has begun its slow retreat into winter silence. The house creaks a little more. The floorboards groan under your boots like they know something's changing. Because something is. You've been different lately. Not loudly, not scandalously, but undeniably. You speak more. You question more. You pause before obeying. And though no one says it out loud, they feel it. The maid watches you with quiet curiosity. Your sister hovers near your journal. Even your mother hesitates before correcting your hemline. You've begun slipping little truths into conversation. You mention how women can't vote, and how absurd that is. You mention a woman in London who opened a bookshop without a husband. You say it lightly, calmly, but the words land like footprints in fresh snow. One evening, your father tells a story at dinner about a woman who forgot her place. He chuckles at the ending, something about her being sent abroad to recover her sense. You look at him and say, maybe she was finding it. The room goes still. You take another bite of stew. The world doesn't end. That night, your sister slips into your room. She asks to borrow a book. Not one from the family shelf, one of yours. You give her a pamphlet. She doesn't smile, but she holds it like treasure. Before bed, you return to your journal one last time. You write, "This voice used to be a whisper. Now it is a thread, one I pass from hand to hand." You pause, then add, "We are not stories waiting to be told. We are storytellers, finally telling." Fun fact: many suffragists and reformers of the late Victorian period were inspired by women who had no official recognition, just quiet persistence. It was in drawing rooms, kitchens, schools, and even bedrooms like yours that real change began. Experts still debate what moment marked the turning point in women's history. But for you, the turning point is now. You fold your journal closed, place it on your shelf beside the dull etiquette books, and smile. Outside, the moon is rising. You stand by the window, shawl draped loosely over your shoulders, and watch as a breeze lifts the last stubborn leaves from the tree in the yard. They twirl, hesitate, and let go. And in that motion, you see yourself, not falling, changing direction. You climb into bed without corset, without pretense. You rest your hand over your ribs and breathe, deeply, fully. Tomorrow will come, with all its tasks, its teacups, its traps. But tonight, you're free. End of script. Sweet dreams.